Hey everybody, it's me, John Anthony Chihawk Soltero. I am the anti-hero, and it is time to talk about the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Harley Quinn figure. Um, on my right, your left, um, is the very, very first Harley Quinn figure that was ever produced from the then rebranded Batman the Animated Series, which was then the the Adventures of Batman and Robin. Um, at the time when this figure came out, it was the most sought after figure. I spent literal months tracking it down locally. Um, the market here in Tucson at that point in time was better and worse than it is now. I mean, um, we had Toys R Us way back when. We had all the department stores: Walmart, Target, Kmart. Um, there were not as many specialty shops in terms of comics, and most of them didn't really sell action figures. Um, I forget exactly how I found it. I think I went to the indoor swap meet and I found the first one. I've owned three or four of these at one specific time. The first one I took out of the package. I actually just looked for that one to, kind of do a comparison and didn't find it, but I didn't didn't look very hard. I've tried recording this video several times, and each time I get a little bogged down with continuity or going off track, which is kind of just something I do. But wanted to go over the positives and negatives like I've been doing with the last couple of McFarlane Toys reviews. The last one I did, of course, was the Mortal Kombat Scorpion figure, which is a phenomenal looking figure. Once I get that short sword sheath in place in a better way, it's going to be even better. Um, the Harley Quinn figure thus far, this is the third DC Multiverse figure that I've gotten. I've got the Nightwing on pre-order at GameStop, so within the next week and a half, I'll have that in hand and do an unboxing and review. This is the best figure thus far. I really like the John Stewart Green Lantern because it was the first John Stewart Green Lantern I had. It's also, I think, only the second Green Lantern figure I had. I've had other Lantern figures, but not other Green Lantern figures. Um, the Batman was a good one. His posability was a little limited because of the way the cape was formed over the shoulders. In fact, on the last recording that I did a side-by-side height comparison, and the animated Batman and this Harley Quinn, exact same size, which is a little bit problematic because on her data file card that came with the figure, this is the cover to Harley Quinn 15 back from the 2000s, early 2000s series that was ongoing for about 30 issues. This says she is 5'7" and 140 pounds. Now, actually, that's kind of a realistic height to weight ratio, for an individual. But at the same time, she went to college on an athletic scholarship for gymnastics. And if she went to college for gymnastics, chances are she was practicing gymnastics from the time she could walk. And I don't know if you're familiar with gymnastics, but most gymnasts aren't going to be 5'7", not unless they stop pretty early on. All that jumping and landing and everything. I've known a couple of gymnasts in my time, and most of them even at the high school level, and they were short, 4'11", 5 foot maybe. And they told me, like a lot of that has to do with all the pressure that they put on themselves with the hard landings and so that it stunts their growth. So the fact that she's 5'7" is kind of weird, but I mean, I guess you got to make her somewhat of a formidable physical threat. The problem is that standing next to the Batman the animated figure, they're the same height. Now Batman is 6'2", 6'3", depending on which mythos you're using, but I guess it doesn't really help that Harley has these heels, and in the original figure and in a lot of the iterations of the animated series, she's got just the pixie boots, just like these, but without the heels. It's completely flat. This figure has a lot of pluses. way more pluses than minuses. The only two minuses I can really think of are the hammer that they use or that they give her, and I'm not sure if they're doing a Birds of Prey, um, a Birds of Prey figure, because there is a picture of the Margot Robbie Harley Quinn from Birds of Prey on the back of the box. So I don't know if that's going to be released at a later date or not. Um, but this is the movie hammer. So like all the detail that they put on it, there's like all the wood grain and the splits and everything. She never used this in the comic book. She definitely never used this in the animated series. All the pre-reviews before the figures came out were indicating that this figure was the BTAS figure. And her face, while like softer and definitely more animated, I don't feel really reflects the animated style. She looks very sleepy, very droopy. So that's like one of the only other negatives of the figure. The other thing that I was going to say is, I mean, you know, you got the hammer doesn't fit, but maybe they only made one hammer for both of the figures, and they're like, let's just double purpose this instead of molding another one. There are other Harley Quinn figures. This is from the DC Direct New 52 Harley Quinn, the Suicide Squad roller derby Harley Quinn. This is probably not going to fit in her hands unless you pose her differently, but actually you can probably do it like that. And it's going to be a little more to scale than this hammer. As you can see, the head is going to be a lot bigger. The handle is going to be a lot smaller, but it is going to be probably a better fit, in my opinion, for the figure. The detail on this figure, there's not a ton of detail. On her, the frills on her wrists are pretty nicely done. There's some waviness on the material for around her collar piece. But it's a pretty, I wouldn't say basic figure, but it's a simplified figure. Let me just say that. The gun itself is pretty well detailed. I mean, you've got this like silver chromed, like brushed finish to it. You know, the grip is painted. The bang flag is pretty, stands out really well for the size of it. It's also the snub nose version of the revolver, which is kind of cool. So what I did find when looking for, let me dust this off a little bit. When I was looking for the loose version of this figure, I did find the gun that came with it, and it's a snub nose revolver as well, which is kind of cool. But it's all done in like one piece of plastic. So the bang on the flag is very difficult to see, but still just a classic piece. This was something that this figure couldn't hold very well. And then the boxing glove gun that she had that you would snap onto her wrist, she couldn't stand up anyways, but once you snapped that thing onto her wrist, you had to like lean her back or prop her against something because she would just tumble over, or the clasp would let go and it would just fall off. Here's one of the things that I really appreciate about this figure. So like the male figures, especially the animated figures, very tailored V shape, accentuated even more so. So you kind of get that more classic heroic look, even though the legs are a little bit smaller than I would prefer, even for the animated series. So this is a real bonus, I think, to this figure. Although somewhat unrealistic, is like, look at her hourglass figure, which is a little bit more synonymous with the animated series. The Bruce Timm styling of designing characters. He did make the female characters a lot curvier. He made the male characters a little more V-shaped, broad-shouldered. So gave them that kind of just like really classic aesthetic. One of the things, I mean, she's got a teeny tiny little waist, especially with her wider hips, but that actually kind of makes sense for, you know, balance and everything, and probably actually helps with the balance when I had her posed with the hammer out here and the gun in front and stuff like that. And this is something that some people may or may not notice. I mean, she's got a little bit of like roundness in her shoulders, which is kind of nice. Her thighs have shape to them They're not just sticks going up and down. The calves themselves, I mean, there's some shape to them. There's some symmetry to them, which is nice. Here's the thing that I really appreciate. I tend to draw my female characters pretty curvy, pretty voluptuous, bigger hips, bigger thighs, bigger butt, and they actually gave the figure a butt. It's not just kind of like flat or paneled out. Like, I mean, there's detail to it. Maybe a little bit too much for an action figure. You could argue that. However, with the advent of these, $20 and $25 starting retail price figures, they're not really meant for kids anyways. So it's arguable that, putting a little bit more detail or a little bit more anatomy to the figures, in my opinion, would be okay, even though they're sold in the toy aisle. They're definitely a more specialized toy, because how many, 9, 10-year-olds are walking around with, 40, $50 to be able to buy 2 figures. This is usually going to be something that an adult or somebody with a job buys. So I don't see an issue with them accentuating the anatomy on a male or a female figure. But the detail on this figure, while a little bit more simplified than some of the other figures we're going to see, and definitely way less than the Scorpion Mortal Kombat figure, this is a great figure. I really like this figure. I wasn't sure about it when I saw the production stills on Toy Shiz because of the way the knees buckled under and were like hyperextended from the bottom of the patella. Let me see if I can actually get the knee to do that. So the one I saw at Harley's Toys and Comics yesterday, when I went to go get this from Target, in the package was like this. The one I bought wasn't really like this. So like it kind of had the almost back of the dog leg coming out from behind it. So the knees are obviously hyperextended. That's one of the negatives when you get the double joining on the knees and the elbows, is sometimes they get into those like really funky positions. However, it also adds to it. So like Harley can get into these like, mischievous poses, near her face, or, the super kickback poses, which you can't do with a single joint. I think it also helps add to the ability to balance, because then you can position the top and the bottom joint on the knees a little bit differently. These ankles rotate really well. They don't roll side to side. It's not a ball joint per se. It is physically a ball joint, but it tips forward and back. And of course, she's got the pointy toes that go forward and back. But I'm a fan of this figure. I've liked Harley Quinn since I first saw her in the Batman the Animated Series back in 92, 93. Like I said, spent several months trying to find this figure and collect it, and found several of them. Got the Batman Harley Quinn one-shot in 99 when they crossed her over into the regular mainstream DC universe. I actually have a Batman Adventures 12. Not planning on keeping it, and planning on selling it, but at the same time, like, it was part of the hunt and part of like finding things and being a fan of the character. But overall, I would say this is a really good figure. There are some paint flaws on this, but I mean, each individual figure is always going to have different flaws to it. Like, part of the details are missing. With the Batman the Animated Series one that I just bought last week, there were 2 in store, and one of them, the face was a little bit messed up, and one, the utility belt, had a little bit of paint smearing on it. I'd rather the face look nice, and the utility belt, it was kind of on the top, so it wasn't as noticeable. If you're familiar with the Star Wars Black Series, every single Poe Dameron X-Wing suit figure that I saw ever, his eyes were painted so poorly, he looked cockeyed. The eyes are usually the ones that get pretty bad. So far with the McFarlane Toys of these DC Multiverse figures, been really good. Of course, Batman, it's just white on the mask. Green Lantern, he's got the green pupils, but they looked pretty spot on. If you look at her eyes, yeah, she's got that kind of like sleepy but almost mischievous look, but the eyes are spot on. The mouth is painted well. The mask is, painted evenly and everything. So this is a quality figure. If you find it in the wild and you buy it for retail, which is $20, I recommend doing it. I would even, like if you're a fan of Harley or a fan of DC, or you're just kind of a completist for the set, most specialty shops you can probably get it for like 25, $26. I would say worth it. I mean, the main detraction, like I was saying, is the hammer. It doesn't make any sense, but my guess is they made one hammer for both the animated version and then the Birds of Prey version that'll be coming out later, I'm suspecting. And so they didn't want to, sculpt two different hammers. But to me, if you're doing a higher end figure, then like this one, when it came out, was retailing, I think like $6 or $7, maybe $5 or $6. I don't remember how much I paid for them, probably around 15 to 20 each when they came out. But I mean, if you're gonna be doing like more collectible figures that are starting off at $20, I would prefer that you do individual accessories, even if you're doing variants. I know that's not necessarily cost effective, and it does harm the bottom line for companies and stuff, but quality really counts. I create comic books and I try to make, or I don't like to use the word try, I do my very best to make sure that the pages and the panels and the continuity really fit together. And if it's something that I notice, if there's like a quality control issue, or one of my editors sees it and it's just like, hey, what's going on right here versus right there? Like, is this the same dog? Why are they colored differently, or what have you? I was actually just working on one of the pages for the Bubba Patrol to kind of segue and really facets this with the quality control aspect. So I started redrawing the Bubba Patrol digitally. I had one page that was saved to the cloud before the hard drive conked out, or wasn't able to save to the hard drive, so was able to save it to the cloud. So there's a panel where one of the dogs is running up, or sitting there talking to one of the other dogs, and there's Foley is sitting behind Cypress, and then Sabu and Guri are kind of walking up. And for whatever reason, I didn't look at the rest of the page and was just inking that final panel. And I started inking Foley as though he was Guri. So I was separating the hairs at the top of the head because Guri has like a silvery white patch on top of her head. Foley is just beige completely all over. And then I look over to the side, and Guri and Sabu are already inked. And Guri is very distinct because, one, her collar has a little heart on it, not a bone. She's got the separated hair patch. It's always lined out, and then there's a couple of hairs to give her detail. And then she's got the white J on her chest. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay. So I had to go back over, and it took like, 15, 20 seconds to erase the front line of the hair on Foley. And not that would have been a disastrous thing in an end product, but it's one of those things that I like to control when I can, because the higher quality product I can put out, the more pride I have in my product. And I believe that my readers and fans, when they see that, they appreciate that level of detail or subtraction of detail, because some of the characters are a little more simplified than others. I actually want to start working, and speaking of like figures, I want to start working on doing like animated stylings of the Bubbas. And I think that may be something that I do for the first one shot following this third issue. Maybe I'll do it in a Adventures of the Bubba Patrol or Bubba Patrol Adventures, and kind of make it an even more simplified style. I just think it would be a lot of fun to view them in different ways, and kind of also do character concepts potentially for an animated series, and then have something to pitch. I mean, that's what my background is in. It's in animation. So there's a lot of details and a lot of concept and character development that I'm very familiar with. So this figure, yes and no. To segue back, sorry. Yes and no. It does and it doesn't fit with the BTAS styling. It does in the way that the character design and the colors are simplified. The costume is matte, with the exception of the diamonds that are decaled on. Those are gloss. The white on the collar piece and the little fringe balls and the frills on her wrists, those are also gloss. But this is a good figure, and I would definitely recommend picking it up, whether you're a Harley Quinn fan, whether you're a DC Comics fan, or whether you're just an action figure fan in general. I gotta go because these guys are getting a little restless. I'll see you later. Take it easy.